Whenever I cover a potential remake or remaster of a Final Fantasy game, one comment always crops up, whether I'm talking about the Final Fantasy IX remake, a Final Fantasy Tactics remaster, even a Final Fantasy XV remaster, and of course the Final Fantasy XIII remastered trilogy. The comment that comes up is that we want a Final Fantasy VIII remake. What about Final Fantasy VIII? So in today's video, I am asking the question, do we really need a Final Fantasy VIII remake? And if we do, what would that look like? So I'm hoping to go over some ideas that I have that I will share with you all. And of course, I would love to get your feedback and your ideas in the comment section down below. So with that being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. As always, got you covered with timestamps down below, so if you want to skip to a certain section, feel free to do so. All I ask is you to support the channel and hit the like button. And if you want to stick around for some more Final Fantasy content, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. So Final Fantasy VIII. I love Final Fantasy VIII. I've gone on about talking how much I've loved Final Fantasy VIII. I always go back and play it for its story, its gameplay, and everything else in between. And the idea of a remake, of course, makes me want one, but whether we get one is a different story. So we're just leaving the field open with ideas, and I'm hoping you guys can get involved. And I'm going to go over Final Fantasy VIII beat by beat when it comes to its story, gameplay, music, and everything it brings to the table, and how I would like to see it in a remake. Of course, these are my opinions, so you don't have to agree with them. We can have a nice discussion in the comments. So I want to start off with the story because I want to get it out of the way. I like the story of Final Fantasy VIII, but there are definitely ways they can improve telling that story and the pacing of that story. So I personally would like a chapter-based system to keep things going with the flow, much like the remake series has done for Final Fantasy VII. I feel like telling the story between Squall and Laguna would be much easier in this format, and also it gives opportunities to give us more lore on the world of Final Fantasy VIII. I would love having what they do in Final Fantasy VII Remake when we're obviously following Cloud, but then we switch to a cutscene of what's going off in the Shinra building. I would love to be starting off playing as Squall, going through Balamb Garden, heading towards the Fire Cavern, and having little cutscenes of what's prepping up towards the parade with Adia and what's happening with the whole sorceress thing, a little bit of backstory, because it comes out of nowhere and we're wondering why everyone's just letting this sorceress kill the president. I would love to see the influence and how it starts to build on the governing bodies of Dailing City and Galbadia. Of course, I would love to have more focus on the time compression shenanigans, and again, really diving into the sorceress war. Maybe a few flashbacks interweaved with the Laguna flashbacks would do nicely for me. But apart from that, I don't think I would want much more from story. I just want it nice and structured and told really well. And of course, voice acting falls into that. We've got to have voice acting, but I would like the storytelling to be much akin to how 7 Remake does it. And when I say 7 Remake, I don't mean like changing things. I want Final Fantasy VIII to be kept the same without any mystery like Final Fantasy VII Remake has given us, but just tell the story as it is, but in a little bit more detail. Let's move on to the gameplay. What would I like out of the gameplay of Final Fantasy VIII? And I've been thinking about this a lot, like how would I like to traverse the world of Final Fantasy VIII? And I really think that it should take the blueprint that Final Fantasy XV offered. I was playing Final Fantasy XV on stream and I was just driving the car, playing some Final Fantasy VIII music on that radio. And I was thinking, I can imagine myself renting a car from Balamb Town, driving all the way to Balamb Garden. And maybe there's an optional area in the first island of Final Fantasy VIII as well. Or when we go over to Dollet, or when we go over to Dailing City, to rent the cars and traverse on these roads if we want to. Or if we don't want to take the car, we can get off at any time and just roam around the open world with things to find. I think the layout of 15 would fit Final Fantasy VIII perfectly. There's so many nuts and crannies you could add. For example, expanding on the chapter-based storytelling that I was on about, I think it would be magnificent if straight off the bat, at the beginning of the game, we have to go to the fire cavern. As we all know in Final Fantasy VIII, in front of the fire cavern, there is a big forest with a T-Rex that you might encounter. I would take this forest, combine it with the fire cavern and turn it into one big dungeon and introduce the T-Rex as like an optional boss or just roaming in the distance. You can come across it. It introduces it briefly because we might fight it later in the training center or something like that. But having these bigger expanded spaces to really dive into some of the great things about Final Fantasy VIII. I think of the Tomb of the Unknown King and how maddening of a maze of a dungeon if it was just expanded on and 3D and going into dead ends, finding treasure chests, finding bosses, going against flans that can absolutely whoop your ass. I've not even got onto the subject of Esther and just the futuristic nature of it, but I would love a world that was built like Final Fantasy XV. Now you're probably thinking, well, Jen, what about piloting a massive garden or piloting Ragnarok? And I'm thinking, yeah, these are probably obstacles. How would you take something that is a 3D space that you walk into and then turn it into a massive warship? Of course, it goes one-on-one with Galbadia Garden later in the game. And these are just kinks that I can't work out in my head, but I'm sure as a group we could probably figure it out. But I do think the Final Fantasy XV layout would fit Final Fantasy VIII. So let's talk about combat. And again, this is something that I was really thinking about. What do I want from combat? We'll talk about its systems after combat, but I'm talking about just getting into battle. And for the longest time, I was thinking, yeah, it would make sense if it was a little bit like Final Fantasy VII-R in that hybrid system. But then I was thinking, I don't think it would work for me. And I was thinking, maybe, just maybe, Final Fantasy VIII Remake should stick more turn-based and it should be really snappy and fast. A lot like, I always refer to these when I say snappy and fast, but they do it so damn well, the Persona series and Metaphor. I feel like this would really complement the characters because the characters all offer something really different that I don't think you could do in an action setting quite so well. I think the mechanic of Squall's Gunblade would feel so damn nice as just sticking to a turn-based ATB system and still hitting that R1 button to get the extra damage. Diving into Quistis's blue magic, I just think it fits as a turn-based ATB system. It can be so easy to say, well, I'll have Irvine play like Barrett, I'll have Zell play like Tifa, I'll have Renoa play like Yuffie, but I just don't think it would work for me. I'd like to keep it turn-based, but have it real-time, being able to maneuver around the field a little bit, much like the Like a Dragon turn-based games, having the environmental advantages. And that ties us into the draw system quite nicely, because what do we do with the draw system? I would keep it very much the same because I'm a fan of the draw system. I always have the belief that if you just take it for what it is and don't invest too much time into it, you have a much better time with Final Fantasy VIII. So in a way, I would kind of gate how much you can draw from enemies and have certain enemies have like a defense mechanism from drawing magic. Maybe you can only draw magic when you weaken an enemy to a certain point, or if you have an ability on, you can draw instantly, but you can only draw up to a certain amount in battle, just so you don't go into the one battle, draw 100 and then you're kind of done with battles. You want to have your players be invested in the system, and I think having some kind of gate, some kind of wall up when it comes to drawing, I think it'll be perfect. And of course, on the field, I'll have drawing much like it is in Final Fantasy XV, where you find like an elemental pool of something that you can draw out the way. And when you have more abilities, instead of it just being thunder from the thunder deposit, maybe it creates it into a wind. I'm just going off the top of the head here, but I think that taking what Final Fantasy XV does when you draw the magic from these points, having it in Final Fantasy VIII just works out. And have some that are secret, that look like normal things, but if you go up to it and interact with it, it's like, ooh, I sense magic here, and it's just a rock, and you get earth from it. I don't know, just something like that. But I think the draw system should stay intact, and then we'll move on to the junction system with GFs. With it being turn-based and ATB-based, I would keep summons exactly the same, keep the compatibility up, really dive into the fact that GFs can affect the memory. So maybe if we use a GF too much or use their abilities too much, that maybe we lose magic because we forget to cast it or something something along those lines. Interweave this story mechanic into the battle system, and I think it will work out pretty nice. But these are just my ideas. I would love to hear your ideas. Is there anything else I would add to a Final Fantasy VIII Remake? No, not much. I would like to keep it pretty much the same. Look nice, play nice, and of course it leads us to the music. The soundtrack. I think that Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack is one of the best Final Fantasy soundtracks, if not in video games, and I would love it to just remain untouched. But at the same time, I love hearing new arrangements, maybe new music for certain areas. And that's all I've got to say on the music. Give me an option to have the original soundtrack, and if you make an arranged soundtrack, let me have the option to mess around that too. Now I feel like I'm going back and forth because I'm thinking of like the whole seed exam stuff and the school setting. Would I take something from Persona where we have to go to class to learn things, go back to Balam? I think it would work in the earlier parts of the game, but later in the game, of course, Squall becomes the leader of the garden, guiding it to battle and victory. So having the ability to have a school type system wouldn't work because you'd be gated to only use it in the beginning of the game. So what I would propose is to have Squall maybe go back to the classroom every once in a while and answer questions on what you've experienced so far. Give us some more lore of Final Fantasy VIII. I'm playing Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza, and in those games, especially the later games, there is a vocation school where you answer various questions and you get rewarded for it. I would bring something like this, a nice little mini game that's in Balam Garden, and have us earn the money that way. Let us have rewards there, maybe unlock new abilities to really get us involved with those systems. And I would probably scrap the whole money system that we get from the seed, getting paid that way. I would keep it traditional. Let us earn gil from getting enemies, and that's all I want. And then there's Triple Triad. Just give us more cards, more rules, completely abolish the random rule maybe. Just keep it the same. Give us Shuffle and Boogie. Give us many people to go against, many rare cards that we can go against. Maybe introduce in a town, maybe there's a bar in Daling City where there's a Triple Triad tournament of which we can get rare items and abilities that we can teach our GFs. I think I touched on everything I would like from a Final Fantasy VIII Remake. I just know for a fact that when I read through the comments, there's probably many things that I've forgotten about or get ideas from or completely agree with. So please throw all those comments down below of what you would like from a Final Fantasy VIII Remake. I appreciate your time, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.